Hello and welcome to the first upload in an embarrassing amount of time. Today we are going to be playing Kerbal Space Program Career Mode. The goal for this is to go interstellar and explore every planet. Few disclaimers: I have a tendency to go full out on mods, and I highly advise that you have a decent enough computer in order to run the game. Also, yes, I do have MacLeod 2 installed. I know how to play the game. To begin, I head off to Mission Control and accept the first two contracts. We assemble the rocket that everyone starts off with and take the Ambition 1 to the launch pad. We conduct our first experiments on the pad before we hurl Jeb into the air. Then I ignite the motor and conduct observations while in the sky. After that has been completed, I arm the parachutes and come barreling towards the ground. We make contact and perform a few more experiments while we're landed on the crawlerway. We recover Jebediah and research Engineering 101, Basic Rocketry, and Survivability. Afterwards, we accept the contracts, escape the atmosphere, and test TD-12 decoupler. I stick some of our new toys to the sides of the command pod, and then slap the decoupler underneath. We gather pressure readings and temperature data on the pad before we test out the decoupler. For some reason the game wasn't letting me recover the craft, so I went out on EVA and tried to gather some data while we were stuck here. And then for some reason only after we go back into the command pod would the game finally allow me to recover Jeb. I accept the contract to test out the parachute before running back to the VAB. We assemble another very crude rocket using liquid fuel and a swivel engine before launching it. We turn on SAS, max throttle, and then we ignite the engine and send Jeb hurtling once more. I very carefully monitored our speed and altitude so we can satisfy the conditions our contract specifies. As soon as those conditions have been completed, I arm the parachute so we can complete the contract. We touch down once more and take even more data from the ground so we can maximize our science output from this. We accept the contract to test the Hammer SRB and then research stability and basic rocketry. We create another tax write-off to fulfill the contract using basic liquid fuel engines and the Hammer as the upper stage. We drag the Ambition 2 to the launch pad and begin our ascent. We reach our speed and altitude and ignite our engine. Once we use all our fuel, we decouple and arm the chutes. We then touch down in the grasslands and take data while we're here. We then recover our craft and use our amassed funds to upgrade the VAB. We accept another contract and then test more parts that the contract gives us. Afterwards, we research basic science and then create the tumble dryer, capable of barely moving us around the KSC to collect science. Because of how tedious it is to move, I only bring it to the runway and the desert launch site. We use the data that we collected to unlock general construction in order to fulfill the tourist contract. I add a crew cabin underneath the command pod, and then later attach backwards fins on top of the command pod in order so we can maintain our trajectory once we begin descent. I launch the vehicle and then make sure our apoapsis is above 70 kilometers so we barely reach the edge of the atmosphere. Once we reach our suborbital altitude, I then pitch over to retrograde and then kill off a speed a bit. Then we detach the pod and then begin descent and pop the chutes later. We take another contract and then upgrade the launch pad so we can assemble our first orbital vehicle. We make the usual upper stage and a big dumb booster with SRBs to the side. I then upgrade the astronaut complex so we can take the data from the ship. With that, the Ambition 3 is ready to launch. In order to get to orbit, we have to swing our craft around towards the east direction so we can take advantage of Kerbin's rotation. This is called the gravity turn, where we effectively fall to the ground and miss, which is essentially just an orbit. We finally get into orbit, and conveniently our apoapsis is considered high space, so we can get more valuable data when we run our experiments there. Once that has been completed, we burn retrograde at apoapsis and then fall back to Kerbin. We research advanced rocketry and electrics, and take another contract. We we made yet another rocket to test more parts so we can make money off of contracts. I then take another Ambition 3 so we can actually aim for a Mun flyby. Contrary to popular belief, you can't actually just point straight at the Mun and continue thrusting, because you have to account for the fact that the Mun actually orbits Kerbin. Taking this into account, we raise our apoapsis at a moment where, by the time we reach our apoapsis, the Mun should be there when we get there. Once we enter the Mun sphere of influence, we then run our experiments and then take Jeb out on EVA, so we can both take an EVA report and then collect our data and bring it back into the pod. Luckily, our trajectory around the Mun actually still places us in a semi-reasonable periapsis, so all we have to do is when we get close to Kerbin, we burn retrograde a bit so we can kill off some speed. Under contracts this time, we return back to the Mun, where we have to circularize and capture into orbit around it, while also going on EVA to fulfill another contract. In order to escape the Mun's sphere of influence and still have a semi-reasonable periapsis, we have to counter the Mun's orbit around Kerbin. We make a few adjustments to lower our periapsis into the atmosphere, and then time warp back to Kerbin. We accept even more contracts and part tests so we can amass enough funds to perform a Mun landing in return. We then research fuel systems and lifters, and using our new toys, we create a very basic lander, a transfer stage, and our orbital stage. And with that, the Luna 1 is set. And then burn retrograde once more so we can find the perfect landing site for our craft. I used the Kerbal Engineer readout mod in order to perfectly time our suicide burn, so we don't end up crashing into the moon, but also so we don't waste all of our fuel trying to land. I carefully monitor our throttle so we don't end up going back up, and then softly touch down on the Mun. I take Jeb out, plant the flag, and then run our usual slew of experiments. I also have a contract to find the Mun Stone, So I take Jeb out on a little adventure and then collect it to bring back to the KSC. Now that our time here is up, I then insert ourselves into a very low Mun orbit and then plan our Kerbin return. I then research advanced flight systems, miniaturization, and efficient propulsion. I then take a contract to dock in LKO. I then assemble the Star Trotter Mark I, capable of in-space docking. I then load up Val in order to send her first to dock. Afterwards, I send up Jeb. As we approach closer to Val, we then decouple and then prepare for our docking maneuver. Now that we amassed some funds, I now spend some science researching space exploration and advanced fuel systems. Using these, I assembled the Luna 2, a biome-hopping Min-Mis lantern that can take both Jeb and Bob into Min-Mins. And we have our usual slew of experiments, plus enough fuel to actually get around the place. I used the skipper engine for our core stage and 2 kickback SRBs attached radially to get us into space. And with that, Luna 2 is off to the races. Make a very bouncy touchdown in Min-Mis's Greater Flats. After faffing about for a bit, we actually touched down for real and get Bob out on EVA to perform the experiments. We plant our flag and then load up Bob once more and head off to another biome. Touch down once more in Min-Mis's Flats biome and perform the same song and dance once more. Our last site we visited was Min-Mis's Slopes. At last, we ascend into low Min-Mis orbit and then plan our trajectory back home to Kerbin. Now this marks the end of the video. This took so much longer than I thought it would, and I had to reshoot because OBS decided to mess up the video quality and record at the worst possible resolution. Anyways, let me know if I should continue this in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Okay, bye.